"Name your friends, sir, or I shall name you a coward in every room at these wells before midnight." The pistols were as good as loaded, and the Duke of Ridgemont was still deciding what to say when a young woman he had never seen in his life walked out of the crowd, took his face in both her hands, and kissed him in front of 140 people. The assembly room at Ridgemont Wells went absolutely silent. The fiddles had stopped some minutes before, when Sir Boyce Prendergast had begun shouting. Now even the shuffling stopped. She let go of him. She was small and steady, and there was a great deal of color in her cheeks, and she turned round to face the room with her chin up, as though the whole thing had been rehearsed. "He was not at your wife's window at midnight, Sir Boyce," she said, "because at midnight he was with me, in the shrubbery walk behind the pump room, and I am extremely sorry to say it in this company, but I would rather be sorry than see a man shot at dawn for something he did not do. There. Now everybody has heard it, and you may all look at me instead." Everard Locke, who had not been kissed since the year his wife died, and had not been kissed like that in his life, stood with the taste of somebody else's courage in his mouth, and could not think of one useful word. Sir Boyce Prendergast, who was 54 and purple, looked from one to the other of them and said, "You, who the devil are you?" "Miss Clemency Fairborn. My aunt keeps the lodging-house in Cross Street. I read to invalids at 3 shillings the week." She said it clearly, as though reciting a charge sheet against herself. "I am nobody at all, sir, and I have just told a room full of my betters that I was out at midnight with a man I am not married to, so you may take it that I am telling the truth, since there is no possible advantage to me in it." There was a noise from the crowd, like a sea going out. "And your quarrel is finished," said Clemency Fairborn, "because a man cannot be in 2 places, and you cannot shoot a gentleman for being where I say he was, and if you attempt it, I shall stand up in the churchyard on Sunday and say the whole of it again." Then she walked the length of the room and out through the door, and it took the assembly at Ridgemont Wells perhaps 4 seconds to begin talking, and it did not stop for 11 days. Everard got out through the card-room. He stood in the cold of the gravel walk with his hat in his hand and pieced it together, which took him about a minute, and left him feeling as though he had been struck. He had come to the Wells 11 days before under the name of Mr. Locke, in a plain grey coat, for the excellent reason that he was 39, a duke, and had spent 2 seasons being hunted round drawing-rooms by mothers with an accuracy that would have shamed a foxhound. He had come to look at a run-down property above the Wells, drink the water for a knee that had never been right since a fall at Ridgemont, and be nobody for a fortnight. It had been the pleasantest fortnight of his adult life. And at midnight the night before, unable to sleep for the knee, he had walked the shrubbery behind the pump-room alone for an hour, and had seen, he had thought nothing of it at the time, a man come out of a window at the back of the Prendergasts' lodgings and drop into the laurels. He had not been at the window. He had merely been the only man abroad in the gardens, in a grey coat, at the hour when Sir Boyce's man saw somebody in a grey coat go over the wall. And the accusation had been made in a public room, and Everard's whole intention in coming to the Wells had been not to say the words, "I am the Duke of Ridgemont," which were, at that particular moment, the only words that would have stopped it. He had been standing there like a stone, weighing the cost of a duel against the cost of his own name, and a woman who read to invalids for 3 shillings a week had spent her entire reputation to settle it for him. Her aunt's lodging-house in Cross Street had a green door and a card in the window offering apartments. The card was still there 4 days later, and by then there were 3 more like it in the street, because Miss Fairborn's aunt had lost 2 sets of lodgers in a week. Everard knocked on the 5th day. He had spent 4 of them making inquiries in the town, which had been informative, and had made him ashamed. "She will not see you," said the aunt, a small round woman with a face like a fist. "And you may go away, sir, and I hope you are pleased with yourself." "Mrs. Chettle, I have never in my life been less pleased with myself, and I do not intend to go away." He kept his hat off. "May I tell you 4 things in the passage, and you may then shut the door if you choose. 1. Nothing happened in that shrubbery. I was alone. She had never seen me before Tuesday evening, and she has ruined herself for a stranger. 2. The man who came out of the Prendergast's window at midnight was their own footman, one Thomas Pike, who has been paying attentions to the kitchen maid, and who has this morning confessed the whole of it before Sir Boyce and the magistrate, and the pair of them are to be married, and are quite unrepentant. Sir Boyce has withdrawn his challenge, and has apologized to me in writing." "That is 3, said Mrs. Chettle. 4, it will make no difference to your niece." Everard turned his hat in his hands. "I have spent 4 days in this town, and I understand it now. The truth clears me. It does not clear her. She said out loud in a public assembly that she was in a garden at midnight with a man, and the town has decided she is fast, and the fact that she said it to prevent a killing weighs nothing at all against the pleasure of repeating it. 2 ladies who employed her have discharged her. The choir has been reorganized without her. Your lodgers are gone. Am I wrong in any particular?" The aunt's chin trembled once, and got itself under control. "Her brother was killed in a duel," she said, 4 years ago, at Nash Common over a card table at 22 years of age, and my sister never got up from it and died in the spring. That is why she did what she did, sir, and she will not say it to you or to anybody, so you have it from me. She has hated the word satisfaction ever since, and when that man began roaring about naming his friends, she went white as a cloth, and she stood up before I could catch hold of her sleeve." Everard Locke looked at the hall floor of a lodging house in Cross Street for a while. "Where does she read?" he said. "You said she reads to invalids. She has been discharged by 2. Who has left?" "Old Colonel Beddoe in Paradise Row. He is 80 and deaf, and does not know what the town says, and she has not told him." "At what hour?" 11. The aunt narrowed her eyes. "And what do you mean to do at 11 o'clock, Mr. Locke?" "Sit at the back and be quiet," said Everard, "which I am told I do very well." He sat at the back of Colonel Beddoe's parlor for 6 mornings. Clemency Fairborn read the Aldwych paper aloud, and then 2 chapters of a very bad novel about a monk, and then whatever the old man asked for, in a clear, unhurried voice, raised just enough for a deaf man and not 1 degree more, and she never once let him see that she had been crying. On the first morning she looked up, saw Everard by the door, went scarlet, and read on without missing a word. On the second she said, at the end, "You are wasting your time, sir." On the fourth she said, "You are wasting a great deal of your time." On the 6th she came out onto the pavement of Paradise Row and said, "Why do you come?" "Because I owe you a debt I cannot discharge, and I have never before been in a position I could not mend with money, and I find it educational." Everard fell in beside her. "Also because you read a monk aloud with more dignity than I could manage on my best day, and because it is the only hour of my week in which nobody in this town is watching me. May I ask you a question, Miss Fairborn?" "You may ask." "Why did you not simply say the words? You could have said, 'He cannot have been there, I saw him elsewhere.' You need not have." He stopped. "Kissed you?" said Clemency, going pink but not slowing down, because they would not have believed the words. A woman says she saw a man in a garden, and a room full of gentlemen says, "Ah, well, she is mistaken, or she is paid," and the pistols go on. A woman kisses a man in front of 140 people, and there is nothing left to argue about. She has thrown her own character into the scale, and it is the only coin they accept. She looked straight ahead. I knew exactly what it would cost. I have had 4 years to think what I would give to have somebody stop a duel at Nash Common, and the answer is everything. So when it came to it, I did not have to deliberate. Your brother. My aunt has been talking. She has, and I am glad of it. Everard stopped walking. Miss Fairborn, there is something I must tell you, and I have put it off for 6 mornings because I am a coward about it, and after I have told you, you will very likely never speak to me again. Clemency Fairborn turned round in the middle of Paradise Row and looked at him. You are somebody, she said. I have known it since Tuesday. Your coat is plain, and it is cut by a man who charges 11 guineas, and you have a signet with something under the wax, and Mrs. Chettle says you have paid for your lodgings a quarter in advance without asking the price, which no gentleman does unless the price is nothing to him. She folded her hands. Well, say it. My name is Everard Locke, said the Duke of Ridgemont, and I am the 5th Duke of Ridgemont, and my seat is 30 miles from here, and I came to these wells in a plain coat to be let alone. There was a considerable pause. Oh, said Clemency Fairborn, that is very much worse. It was worse, and it got worse with remarkable speed. The town had it by the following evening. A footman at the Crown had seen the letter from Sir Boyce, addressed to His Grace the Duke of Ridgemont, and that was quite enough. Within 2 days, Ridgemont Wells had entirely reversed itself, and the new version was so much more entertaining than the old that nobody bothered to defend the truth. Miss Fairborn had known all along. That was the new version. Miss Fairborn, a lodging-house woman's niece with 3 shillings a week, had discovered a duke in a plain coat, and had thrown herself at him in a public assembly under the pretense of saving him. The boldest stroke, said the Wells with real admiration, that had been seen in that town in 30 years. 2 of the ladies who had discharged her called at Cross Street to leave cards. The choir wrote to say that a place had been found for her after all. Mrs. Chettle had 4 applications for apartments in a week, and refused all of them. And on the 11th morning Clemency Fairborn did not come to Colonel Beddoes. Everard read to the colonel himself for an hour, because somebody had to, and the old man had been looking forward to the monk, and then he went to Cross Street. Halliwell, said Mrs. Chettle, standing in the green doorway with her arms folded and her eyes red. There is a woman there keeps a school for 11 girls and wants an assistant at £20. She went on the 6 o'clock. She left you this, and she made me promise not to give it to you until the coach was past the turnpike, and I have kept my promise, and now I hope you will do something sensible, because I have never seen a girl so unhappy in my life. The letter was 1 sheet, written in a small clear hand, and Everard read it standing in the street. Your Grace, I did what I did on Tuesday to stop a killing, and I would do it again tomorrow, and I have not been ashamed of it for 1 hour. But I find I cannot bear the second version. When they thought me fast, I could hold up my head, because I knew what I had done and why. Now they think me clever, and there is no answer to it. The more I deny it, the more they admire me for it, and the more you are seen in Paradise Row, the louder it grows. And one day somebody will say it in your hearing at your own table, and you will have to decide whether to believe it. I would rather be poor in Halliwell than watch you make that decision. Do not follow me, sir. You owe me nothing whatever. You were only the man who happened to be standing there. Everard Locke folded the letter, put it in his breast pocket, and said, Mrs. Chettle, does your niece own a decent gown? She has one, said the aunt, staring. Gray silk, it was her mother's. Would you be so good as to have it packed, and to come with me in a chaise to Halliwell tomorrow at 7, and to bring the colonel's copy of the Monk, because I have promised to finish it to him, and I find I cannot leave it in the middle either. He was already turning. And I shall want the subscription room at the Wells engaged for Friday evening, and the Assembly's whole list invited, and Sir Boyce Prendergast in the front row if I have to fetch him in a wheelbarrow. Halliwell took a day and a half, and the school proved to be a stone house with a good roof. And Clemency Fairborn came into the parlor with chalk on her fingers, and stopped dead in the doorway when she saw who was sitting there with her aunt. "You had my letter." "I had it, and I have it here, and I have read it 11 times, and I intend to answer it out loud in the room where it began." Everard stood up. "Sit down, Miss Fairborn. You have every right to turn me out. You have not the smallest obligation to hear me, and I have brought your aunt as a chaperone precisely so that nobody in England may ever say another word about either of us. Will you give me a quarter of an hour?" She sat down on the edge of a chair. "You wrote that I was only the man who happened to be standing there," said Everard. "That is true. I have thought about very little else for 11 days, and I want to tell you what I saw from where I was standing. I saw a man of 54 working himself up to kill a stranger over a footman and a kitchen maid, and 40 gentlemen looking at their shoes, and myself among them. A duke with 11,000 acres who could have ended it in one sentence, and was calculating, madam, actually calculating, the inconvenience of saying his own name. And then a woman with 3 shillings a week spent everything she had in public in 4 seconds, without calculating anything at all." "It was not courage," said Clemency. "It was my brother." "It was courage and your brother, and I will not let you have it cheap." He came round the table. "Now the other thing, since I am to be honest. It is not gratitude. If it were gratitude, I should have settled money on you and gone home to Ridgemont a fortnight ago, and I very nearly did, and the reason I did not is that, on the second morning in Paradise Row, you looked up at me over a very bad novel about a monk, and I understood that I did not want to go home. I have sat at the back of that parlor 6 mornings, for the pleasure of hearing you read the shipping intelligence to a deaf colonel, and I have been happier in that chair than in 2 seasons of drawing rooms, and I am 39 and a widower of 8 years, and I know the difference perfectly well." Clemency Fairborn had both hands pressed to her mouth. "They will say I schemed for it," she said. "They are already saying it. That is the point I have come a day and a half to make." Everard held out the letter. "You wrote that one day somebody will say it at my table, and I shall have to decide whether to believe it. I will spare us both the wait. I have decided. And on Friday evening I am going to stand up in the subscription room at Ridgemont Wells, in front of every person who was there on Tuesday, and say what happened and in what order, and Sir Boyce is going to confirm it, and his footman is going to confirm it, and then I am going to ask you to marry me in front of the whole of them, so that there is not a soul in that room who can ever afterward say that it was arranged in a corner." He paused. "You may refuse me there, publicly. That is the risk I run, and I think it a fair one. But you will not have to defend yourself alone in that town for one more day, because I shall be standing beside you, and I have a very loud voice when I choose to use it." "You are asking me to be a duchess in a lodging-house gown," said Clemency, half laughing and entirely crying. "Grey silk," said Mrs. Chettle from the corner. "It is packed." The subscription room at Ridgemont Wells held 240 people on the Friday, which was more than had ever been in it, and there were another 80 in the passage. Everard told the whole of it: the knee, the shrubbery, the man in the laurels, the grey coat, his own 4 seconds of calculation, all of it plainly, in the voice he used in the Lords. Sir Boyce Prendergast stood up when called upon, went scarlet and confirmed every word, and added to his own considerable credit that he had been a fool and a bully, and that Miss Fairborn had saved him from something he would have carried to his grave. Thomas Pike, footman, appeared with his new wife and confirmed the window. Then the Duke of Ridgemont turned to the small woman in grey silk standing beside him, and asked her, in front of 320 people, whether she would do him the honor. She said yes. There was a noise in Ridgemont Wells that night that was heard, Mrs. Chettle always maintained, in Halliwell. They were married in the spring, and Colonel Beddoe, 81 and deaf as a post, was carried into the church in a chair and heard nothing whatever and enjoyed himself enormously. The 11 girls of the Halliwell school walked in front of the bride. The Wells never entirely gave up its favorite version of the story, and the Duchess of Ridgemont learned in time to say, when some brave soul hinted at it, that she had indeed thrown herself at a duke in a public assembly, and that she recommended the practice to nobody, as the man had turned out to be far more trouble than a scandal. Her husband, for his part, kept her letter in his breast pocket for the rest of his life, and every year on the anniversary of that Tuesday he came and found her in a garden, in a passage, once memorably in the middle of a county ball, and kissed her before everyone.